You know, we've got a little movie coming out. I don't know if you've heard, called Avengers Secret Wars. Now, it's coming out after Avengers Doomsday. Now, we've had some speculation on our show. Like Rob has speculated a lot. I've speculated. I'm sure a lot of you guys have speculated, at least until recently, that there was a prevailing thought going around that Marvel may take Avengers Doomsday and split it into two movies. And that seemed to be a very popular opinion. Now, the closer and closer we got, we're now in 2026 and all this kind of stuff. We've started to believe, okay, they would have announced the split by now. Maybe that's not happening. But that doesn't mean that they can't do it with Avengers Secret Wars. Because according to a new report, and again, I want to caution everybody up front, this is not coming from Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, or Deadline. This is coming from one of these internet scoopers that are many times right and great and many times wrong and incorrect. But it's definitely worth looking at because it builds on something a lot of us have speculated already, that they may not be looking at Avengers Doomsday to split into two, but rather Avengers Secret Wars. This comes to us from the folks over at MovieWeb who write this. As of writing, Avengers Secret Wars is in line to conclude Marvel Studios' second massive saga 1 year after Doomsday takes the spotlight this December. However, according to Scooper, we're going back to Daniel Richman, the sixth Avenger movie might not be the one that concludes the story developed across Phase 4 through 6. He shared a new rumor, again guys, huge grain of salt rumor, indicating that Marvel could decide to split Avengers Secret Wars into two movies. But that call will be based on how successful Avengers Doomsday is. This was his direct quote. I hear that the decision on whether to split Avengers Secret Wars into two parts will be based on how successful Doomsday is. All right. There's a lot here to unpack. And let's start with the affirmative. You know, it's understandable when you understand how much story goes into the overall saga of Secret Wars. Not that we're expecting a direct comic book page to movie screen adaptation because they always do their own thing, but there's a lot of story there to tell. That would be even more applicable into Secret Wars than Doomsday. Because Doomsday is really setting up Secret Wars. It's once you get there that a lot of the meat and potatoes is. And so could I theoretically, understanding that Disney is not interested in a 4-hour movie at all, like not at all interested in a 4-hour movie. Understanding that, could Disney possibly look at something like Secret Wars and go, you know, that's a lot of story. If you're going to do it right, yada, 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 let's make it two films. Two 2-hour and 20-minute films rather than a 4-hour and 40-minute film. That seems to me to be plausible. That's not off the table. That seems like it could be within the realm of possibility. And so I certainly won't dismiss it. But that being said, Rob, there's a couple of things in here that work against it. At least this report. And let me go exactly to the thing that bothers me about this report. And that's the actual quote. I hear the decision whether to split Secret Wars into two parts will be based on how successful Doomsday is. What kind of amateur hour fourth grader incompetent thinking would that be? You don't make a major significant decision like this. Disney has never once reacted like that. They have, Kevin Feige has his plans on top of plans on top of plans. When you're developing any movie, Rob, you know this better than everybody. In any MCU, you are talking about years of planning and then scheduling, hiring, set locations, designs, pre-production. You're talking about years of work into every individual film that you do that's not called Avengers. Like even all the other movies they're doing. You're telling me that Disney is just going to sit there and be reactionary to whether or not Doomsday does well? That's bullshit. That's 100%. Now, that's not to say that they're not looking at separating Secret Wars into two films, but the notion that Disney is just going to sit down and wait like nervous little mice to see if Doomsday does any well, that's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. That would be the most amateur hour thing in the world for them to do. Disney is either going to split it in two or they're not, because it's what's best for the movie or it's not. That's going to be the only consideration they put into it. Not because what are they going to do? They're going to have 3 other films planned for the following year that have already have directors and production and people working on it that we don't even know about it yet, and saying, oh, sorry, we're just going to throw all those plans in the air because now we got to do a second movie. And you just got to sit around and wait to see how Doomsday does. Marvel has never operated that way. Kevin Feige will never operate that way. Again, the basic idea that they could be looking at splitting Secret Wars, totally possible. The notion that they're sitting around with their thumbs up their asses going, oh, I just don't know how Doomsday's going to do, is nonsense. Absolute fetid nonsense. So I could totally see them splitting this movie in two, but Rob, the decision is not going to be based on whether Doomsday does well or not at all. Anyway, Rob, you've seen this report. You are one of the very first people that thought they could be splitting Doomsday in two, which a lot of us believed as well.
I still think they should.
Right. But I think we're all both on the same page now that they're not.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty clear they're not. But Secret Wars, that seems to be a more ripe option to maybe do. I don't know. What do you think about this?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I heard from somebody who would know that was the talk. And I heard this months ago. This is specifically about Secret Wars, not about Doomsday. And if you think about it, if you know, and having recently read the Secret Wars Omnibus and the Secret Wars Battle World Volume 1 Omnibus, there's a lot of things that Secret Wars is going to have to do. So as everyone knows, if they follow however closely they adhere to these storylines, you basically have the multiverse is destroyed. Doom creates Battle World. And then after spinning off from that is the new version of the MCU with no multiverse. So I could imagine that the Secret Wars is going to be, status quo. If you follow the storyline, the first Secret Wars would be Battle World has all these different factions made up of all these different heroes trying to figure out who they are, what's going on, what's happening. And the characters in Brand New Day probably aren't involved until they get to Secret Wars, however that works. And then you could introduce, like, I could see them introducing the new X-Men in Secret Wars and spinning them off in the second movie where they're setting all this up. There's so much story to tell, because you have to tell the story of Battle World and what's going on. And then you have to have the final downfall of Doom and the new MCU born out of Secret Wars. So I can see it as a 2-part movie and work beautifully. So that makes sense to me, but they're going to know that in the script phase. They're going to look at this and go, okay, our script for Doomsday was already long enough. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have 2 160-page scripts. And they just looked at it and said, we're amortizing the costs. I mean, the story is all set in the same place. We're doing the same thing. So it really doesn't matter, how long. It's just a question of how long are we going to shoot for? The actors' contracts are going to be the same. But if it's all one long shoot and they break it up into 2 movies, if they can work all that out, I could see that would be the way to go. And they're going to have to know that. From what I understand, I don't think they've started shooting Secret Wars yet. So they're probably trying to get the script right, because it comes out a year after Doomsday. So they could start shooting this movie in the summer, and still have no problem getting it all done. So I absolutely think that it could be broken into 2 movies. It makes sense to me. There's a lot of story to tell. Plus, yeah, no, The Winter Soldier, Age of Ultron.
Like all these things were completely different. So we we don't expect a direct one-to-one to translation, but they often take elements and themes. And if you just sit back and just look at the things that go on in this Secret Wars story, like even just B and C level sub storylines, like the Wall is Ben Grimm, like even just like things like that. The whole idea about Molecule Man. I mean, that's definitely not going to be Molecule Man. It's going to be
No.
somebody else. But that whole subset, the whole stuff about Sue Storm, like that, how's that going to play out? There is so much story to tell. That's why I believe that it is totally feasible that absolutely Marvel could be sitting down, looking at doing this as two films. But I would say this, Rob, if we find out that they are going to turn Secret Wars into two films, it was always their plan.
Always.
That's the thing. This isn't something that I don't believe for a second. This is something Disney is trying to decide. If we find out, and I think it's totally plausible that we do, that Secret Wars is actually going to be a Secret Wars Part 1 and a Secret Wars Part 2, I could totally see them doing it. But if it does happen, that means it was always the plan. 100% always the plan. Because you know what Disney's not going to do, Rob? We've got Doomsday, right? Coming out at the end of 2026. So it's going to be playing as we get into 2027. If Disney was sitting with their thumbs up their asses and just anxiously waiting to see if Doomsday does well to greenlight splitting Secret Wars in two and putting a Secret Wars Part 2 into 2028, Disney is not going to decide what their film slate in 2028 is going to be in 2027. They decide what's going to be on their film slate in 2028 in 2024. They don't wait till 2027 to decide what their film slate and lineup is going to be in 2028. It's just not how they do it. So again, I could totally see them doing this. But Rob, what do you think about my theory that if they do it, which I think is totally on the table, then that tells us it was always the plan from the beginning. Do you think that, or do you think, no, maybe this is something they just decided along the way?
Why, look, I think obviously the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the movies all the way back to Iron Man have been very iterative. They've allowed them to sort of grow and change. Sometimes they don't have a totally finished script. We know, listening to Jeff Bridges talk about being on the set of Iron Man, that they would sometimes go in and rewrite scenes and then they would go shoot things. And if they didn't work as well, they would go back and reshoot things. They build those reshoots into the films. So that's kind of how they've always made these movies. They have a plan, but that plan can change and grow and mutate and evolve, so to speak. But I think if you look at this, they were going to make Kang Dynasty and they were going to make Secret Wars.
Yep.
And when they changed Kang Dynasty, when they moved away from that, they figured they already had a buildup of Kang, who I would imagine would have taken Doom's place in their original Secret Wars plan. But in pivoting and going back to Doom, they have to establish Doom first. So they have to do a little bit more heavy lifting than they had to do with Kang, because they had previous Kang appearances. They had Kang in Loki. They had Kang in Quantum Mania. So they had a little bit more of a buildup. In this case, they don't have a buildup, which leads me to believe that Secret Wars they would need more time. So I would imagine they knew probably, I don't think they originally started to make two Secret Wars movies, but during the production of Doomsday, probably early on, they're like, you know what? We have enough here to make two Avengers movies. And when they're shooting, it's not like they're going to start. What people don't understand is they're going to shoot this movie as if it's one long film. They're going to shoot Secret Wars, whatever it is, because the location's changed. It's different than what's going on. The locations in Doomsday are not the locations in Secret Wars. Totally different vibe, totally different thing.
Yeah.
And so once you're involved, the thing about making two Secret Wars movies, it makes it a lot more manageable, because you're just shooting for a longer period of time, knowing the movies are going to be broken up. It's akin to what Peter Jackson did with the Lord of the Rings movies, or what the Wachowskis did when they made Matrix
2 and
Reloaded and
3
Matrix
together.
Revolution. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of thing where, and plus you're going to have all the characters and all these locations that are going to be amortized across. So it's not like you're doubling the budget. You're still spending more money because you're shooting for a longer period of time. But since everybody's there, it makes sense. The real question that I would be interested in is, are they going to release these movies a year apart, or are they going to release these movies 6 months apart? And if they do release them a year apart, what is Marvel's release slate going to look like from the end of 2026 to 2028? Are they only going to release 3 movies? And if they're Avengers style hits, maybe that's all they need to release.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see.
I think that if you do put out a second Secret Wars, I think they stay with their pattern and put it out in the Christmas season. And that means having to wait a year. But as Marvel has shown us, they don't need to have their films come out sequentially.
Right.
So they have already shown us that they've put out movies in between Avengers films that are not in the time. Like
Captain Marvel is a period piece.
Like Captain Marvel
or the 90s.
Or Ant-Man happened, even though Infinity War came out, the events of Ant-Man 2 actually took place before the events of Infinity War. So I think they would have it come out. If they do a Secret Wars Part 2, they'll follow the pattern. Christmas season 2028, but we still would have maybe 2 other Marvel films that would come out this year that they're probably already working on right now.
Although I do think the story they've chosen to adapt poses a problem, because if Doomsday, sort of ends the way, if you're leading into Secret Wars and knowing what's going to happen, I would assume that there's no more universe to set a Marvel movie in that isn't Doomsday or Secret Wars, because theoretically, if you follow the storyline, there is no more Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's gone.
Well, yeah, but again, let's look at the example of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, right?
Yeah, you'd have to go back
because Infinity War ends and half of existence is gone.
Right.
Yet we have an Ant-Man movie that comes out that like nothing has ever happened.
That's true.
So they have done it before. They can do it again.
But the universe still existed.
Yeah, but half the people were gone, right? And in Ant-Man, they're still there. So like we just understood from the moment that Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, I'm not saying this is the optimal way to do it. I'm just saying they've done it this way. There is precedent. And so you could have like a Doctor Strange movie come out, although he's going to be involved in these movies, obviously. But I'm just saying, theoretically, let's pull something out of the air. Let's say Luke Cage. Just pull something random out.
Right.
You could very easily, if you wanted to, do a Luke Cage movie. And I'm not saying they're doing a Luke Cage movie. I'm just using this as an example. You could do a Luke Cage movie April of 2028 and just say this happens before the events of... You could even say it happens before the events of Doomsday.
Yeah, or
if you want.
What would slot right in would be a Blade movie.
It's adorable how you still think that might happen.
Well, it could do it.
Absolutely adorable.
Because nobody would be paying much attention. You could go back and do Blade. And it's interesting, too.
But you're right. You're 100% right. Blade's a perfect movie you could kind of drop in that and say it happens 2 years ago, 5 years from now. You could just say it happens whenever you want.
Or, you could even, I mean, I'm not saying I've heard anything about this or there's even any plans to do it. You could do a Star-Lord movie. You could do a cosmic movie. And you could end that movie with the universe ending, So the character's like, wait, what? It's just kind of like at the end of it.
Chris Pratt just came out and said in an interview, what are things you're looking forward to doing? And the first thing he said was, well, at the end of Guardians 3, we told the audience that Star-Lord would return, and I'm committed to filling that promise. So maybe we get a Peter Quill movie.
Because there's a lot of characters that I would assume would wind up on Battleworld in Secret Wars that we don't know their disposition. Like, where does the new Vision series leave Vision? Where does Wonder Man wind up? Where does Star-Lord wind up? Where is Captain Marvel? Is Captain Marvel even in it? If we have Share Watch, who knows? I mean, and of course, all the characters in Brand New Day. What happens to them?
Yeah, and why aren't they in there? But I'm sure all those questions will be answered.
But it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, they could even introduce Marvel characters that we have yet to see in the MCU. And somebody we've always wanted to see, and then at the end, whatever happens, and they wind up on Battle World and Secret Wars. If that's the way they go, that'd be interesting. Hell,
anyway, guys,
Beyonder movie, John.
They could, although I think that's beyond the reach of a lot of the average film goers. Guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? There is a report out there that Disney and Marvel might be looking at taking Secret Wars, which doesn't exist yet, and actually make 2 movies out of it instead of 1. I think that's very feasible. I just don't buy for a bone second that they're waiting to see how Doomsday does. That's not how they do things. But it is very possible they could be looking at splitting this thing in 2. Do you think that's the right move? How would you feel about it? Whatever you guys think, jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, we have a daily podcast called the John Campea Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Go and subscribe to it today so it'll be there when you need it.